The question that the attorney asked that I took on the delegation was, who are the rebels? And I think we know that at least one of their leaders, Haftar, by the name, too bad we don't have Wayne Madsen here, he's written about all of this, Wayne Madsen at waynemadsenreport.com. But Haftar was sent back to Libya after having spent 20 some odd years in the city that's just next to Langley, Virginia. And you know, Langley is the headquarters of the CIA. He had no known way to support himself, but he was close to the CIA. And there has been an acknowledgement among the ranks of the so-called rebels of this Al-Qaeda connection. And remember that Al-Qaeda was told to us by the foreign minister of Britain, Robin Cook, that Al-Qaeda was the CIA's Rolodex. So these are people who went to fight. I think they made an admission that they had gone to fight in Iraq. And so these are people who have become, well, the sleeper cells, they've become activated at this particular moment because I think it was a propitious moment.
I just want to add to her Sister McKinney's answer. If you, and you can research this for yourself, there's one of them named Al-Libi, they called him. This is his handler name. He was in Guantanamo.
Yes.
They turned him back over to the Libyan authorities. He's from the eastern part of Libya. And he is one of the leaders in this rebellion, NATO-led rebellion, I like that terminology, against Gaddafi. And he wants to set up a Islamic Emirate of Libya. Now, there's another article, Time magazine, I believe it's Newsweek, did an article about a year ago about the city that supplied most of the Al-Qaeda in the Mesopotamia, and most of them came from Derna in the eastern part of Libya. You can look, they have a whole spread on it. And I'm only saying this to say that should, you know, God, Allah forbid, if something happens to Gaddafi and they do get him and target him, the country will go into a civil war. Because in the east, you have the secular group, you have the pure capitalist group, and you have the religious group. And they're going to fight like they did in Afghanistan, who will dominate the government. And so when they talked about the sleeper cells, they were saying that they freed all of the people. Remember, the NATO-led rebels opened the jails and freed all of the people there, and among them were what they call the extreme element that Gaddafi always had a challenge with, because as Muslims, they said he wasn't a good Muslim because he allowed women to become pilots. He freed the women up. He didn't allow, he preached, he couldn't make it a law, but he preached that one wife is better for you if you but knew, okay, for those who have 2, 3, and 4. And so they said he wasn't a good Muslim. He didn't grow a beard, okay, and his jalabiyah, as the Salafis, was not 6 or 10 inches above his feet. So they considered him not a good Muslim, and they were against Muammar Gaddafi. And so therefore that group got its base in the eastern part of Libya. And so this you have to understand, the one assassination attempt on Gaddafi was in the eastern part of the country. Last year I was in Benghazi, he went there, and I saw on the film, let me just say this, that you saw a flag, a red flag being burned. That was the Switzerland flag. Remember, his son was in Switzerland, he was accused of something, they arrested his son, Then the Swiss made it against the law to build any more minarets, and in Switzerland, which was upset the Muslim world, and Gaddafi asked Muslims to withdraw their money from the Swiss bank, not to go there, asked the whole Muslim world not to do this. The Swiss came in and pleaded with him, gave his son $3 million, apologized to him, and the Swiss tried to get their relation back. So the West did not forget this. And they said, this man, if he can do this to countries throughout Europe, just when and people follow that, then Gaddafi needs to go. The last thing, Perkins' book, The Economic Hitman. There's one line in there, you have to look at this line. It said they'll do everything, like they massage Gaddafi, build a JW Marriott on the water down there, change the Mahari to the Radisson. America had all of these contracts within Libya, the oil contracts, and but he wouldn't play ball. So in the economic, John Perkins, right, in the economic hitman, if they can't pull you in and you don't play ball, then you enter the gun, you bring the gun in. And that's what they did to Muammar Gaddafi.
One other thing to notice about who the rebels are is to see who they've employed as their spokespersons in Washington, and they've employed a very high-powered lobbying public relations group called the Harbor Group, H-A-R-B-O-U-R. Who is the Harbor Group? Who's doing their work connecting with the Pentagon, CIA, media? One of the three principals was the spokesperson for Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign in 1980 and 1984. The second principal was Hillary Clinton's staff director from the 1992 presidential campaign of Bill Clinton. And the third principal of the Harbor Group is the consultant for the Democratic Party for the previous three conventions. When they had a meeting 4 weeks ago in Washington, these three principals with the Libyan rebels, the meeting was attended by ConocoPhillips, Chevron, ExxonMobil, unusual characters to support a national liberation movement, wouldn't you say? I mean, we can see that this grouping, whatever its different shades are, different tendencies and different trends, it's acceptable to the Western oil companies, to NATO, and to the bombers, because they know that if Gaddafi goes, the next regime will be a client regime, a proxy regime, a puppet regime of these same forces.
There. With respect to the legality of this, you're absolutely right that the president has breached his constitutional obligations, but so too has the Congress. And sadly, the Congress made 2 votes yesterday. One of the votes was to authorize, which did not pass. So the Libya action has not been authorized by the Congress. But the second vote was really a backdoor authorization, although the press is characterizing it as a defund vote. It wasn't a clean defund bill. It was going to allow the low kinetic activities to support NATO. That one actually did not pass either. And so what our challenge is now is to keep the issue hot so that when Congress comes back into session, that they still will have to deal with Libya. What they think is that they can schedule these 2 votes, have this debate, people will forget about it, and the situation will go on as it is. The president will continue to bomb and kill people in Libya, and the Congress will continue to do nothing. That's what they are hoping. So our job is to keep these tours going and to keep the discussion going, to send emails in to John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi and all of the rest of them and tell them that your job isn't done until a bill comes before the Congress for a straight defund, which is what Dennis Kucinich offered. That's what we want, a vote on the Kucinich measure. The other thing I'd like to take this opportunity to say is that I think it's a crying shame that the conscience of the Congress, which is the Congressional Black Caucus, voted to bomb Libya. There were only 6 members of the Congressional Black Caucus who said no. John Conyers, Laura Richardson, Maxine Waters, not even John Lewis. John Lewis voted the Democratic Party line to allow Libya to be bombed. Bobby Scott, Barbara Lee, and there's one other who, oh, I have it written down. One other. No, Rangel voted to allow the bombing to take place. And that's a question for, oh, and Jesse Jackson Jr. is the 6th. The only 6 members of Congress had the guts to cast a vote to say no to an illegal war, let alone immoral, but that is bombing people in Africa. It's a shame, crying shame. Now, with respect to the gentleman here, yes, you're absolutely right that a legal action could go forward to stop the NATO bombing until the matter is actually dispensed with in a legal forum. Yes, that could be done. And then you also have many other legal issues that could be taken up. For example, the targeting of civilians, the targeting of infrastructure. Targeted assassination is against the law. So you have this, the people whose family members have been murdered by the NATO bombs also have a claim. So there are several different types of legal actions that are possible, but to date only one has been activated, and that was by Colonel Gaddafi's daughter.
I'm going to take the question on Iran that our sister asked, and I just want to make a comment before I take that. The person who asked about the central bank being set up in Benghazi, you have to understand in the African continent and many countries, a central bank, the only way they set up a central bank, first they robbed the bank that was there. They took all of the money, Libyan currency and the foreign currency, which euros and US dollars. They robbed that. Then the West helped them to set up a central bank so that the money they're going to get from Qatar, the money that they ripped off, $40 billion that Gaddafi had in investments in America, being encouraged to invest. And I want Bryant Becker to talk about the Lehman. I think it was Lehman. Was it Lehman that they gave? Goldman Sachs. And they had an article in the Wall Street Journal about that, but they have just ripped the country off and set up a central bank to combat the $472 billion that Gaddafi has in sovereign wealth that is centered in Tripoli. This is the money that he spent on the African Union and so forth. So this is what they had planned to do. It's like the Iranians. When they froze the Iranian assets, $8 billion, they paid no interest on it at all. They just ripped it off and just kept that money. And this is what they do. Now I want to just answer the question about Iran. Iran is a particular case. You know that they have a spiritual leader because of the Islamic revolution was a spiritual revolution, and because the Shah had tried to make Iran a secular state and marginalize Islam. And so when he came to power, and what brought him to power was one move that Jimmy Carter and the Shah did that really tipped the balance. And the Iranians know that when Jimmy Carter came, the Shah drank wine in public with Jimmy Carter. And the same thing happened in Algeria when they were advising Ben Bella that you have to toast the Russians and you drink a little alcohol, it's all right. But Ben Bella said, no, I'm a Muslim. I don't care what you say. I cannot drink alcohol to please another government and the public of my people. The Shah violated that. And then it was the overthrow. The Khomeini came in. The fear of an Islamic revolution. And that's why they did the Shia-Sunni situation. So Iran emerges, it developed. Now when I first went to Iran, I tell you I was shocked. I expected to see mullahs with AK-47, women in black. That's all I had saw. But when that plane landed in Tehran, and I saw all those 747 planes on the runway, I saw the airport, I went to the TV station, I was shocked at the development of that country. Now, so you have Khomeini, who is the spiritual leader, and you have Ahmadinejad, who is the president of the country, and there's a little rift going on there, but the real problem is its relationship with, starting with Turkey. They built a relationship, their relationship with Syria. And this relationship now, it has moved to Iraq. And they fear now that because of the West trying to get out of there, that the Iranians who have the money will come in and handle a lot of the infrastructure building and other things. And so America has to look at that. So what they have done is said to the Gulf states, which is the United Arab Emirates, there's 7 of them, even though you know Abu Dhabi and Dubai because of the news, but that whole area there, with Iran just across the water. So the Americans have convinced Al-Thani, the Emir of Qatar, that we're here to protect you. So the biggest military base that the U.S. have is there, and they convinced poor Al-Thani to open up an Israeli embassy in Qatar, and they have convinced him that you should be the one that will pump the oil from Libya, give them their first buy of oil, and we will help you to put money in there and also buy weapons. My final note on this is that what is happening now, and I don't know if it's the truth, because the first casualty of war is the truth, okay? And everybody is lying on different sides. But I understand that the State Department has gotten the leadership of the NATO-backed rebels and say that one of the first things you have to do is open an Israeli embassy in Libya. And so this is why Hillary Clinton went before the African Union. I want to answer the question, and she treated them like they were boys. Told them that you should close all of the Libyan embassies where the staff back Muammar Gaddafi. She's telling them what to do in their own independent country. Then you have the problem of her telling that we're going to aid you, we're going to help you. But for her to go to the African Union. So the African Union has to be strong enough. And many of them that Gaddafi helped directly. Museveni wouldn't be in power without Libya. Wade in Senegal. Jammeh in the Gambia. All of these are nations. Debbie in Chad, he has stood by Brother Gaddafi. Touré in Mali, they have stood by him. But in unison, they should walk out of the UN. They should say, this is not a peace council, this is a war council, and we need to be out of here. And this is what will shake the UN and the entire world. Oh, thank you. I think that we, the ICC. The ICC. Now, the ICC, if you notice, their focus has been on Africa, even though they did the Serb war crimes. But if you look at the ICC, Campon, I think he's from Argentina. His first focus, they got Charles Taylor. And Charles Taylor, it wasn't just that Charles Taylor was terrible. They wanted Charles Taylor out because he would not play ball. He had a strong relation with Libya. Libya backed that economy. And when he was elected, now remember in '97 when Charles Taylor became the president of Liberia, the Liberian people who didn't like him say, if we're going to have a government, we're going to vote for Charles Taylor because he's strong enough to hold the government together. And when he got into power, all the West promised, whoever won the election, we will help Liberia to rebuild. But when Charles Taylor won, being that he was close to Gaddafi and Gaddafi was fueling him, they had to undermine him and get him out, and they did a double cross on him. I don't have time to go into it. And they took him to the court. Now, he's been sitting in The Hague going to trial. And he's a man that I've known for years personally, and it looks like he's going to win this case. And now the deal they're making now, that if they let him go, because they have no real evidence, he didn't cut off no arms. He didn't kill nobody. They accused him of selling diamonds to Forte Sankoh in order that he could arm the, what is it called, the revolutionary movement, the RUF of Sierra Leone. Now, if he's freed, now they're working a deal that if he's freed, he cannot go back to Africa.
Well, that's very interesting, and I know we are really short on time, but it's really interesting how all of this interplay comes in, because it's not only who sold the diamonds, but who bought them as well.
Go ahead.
And when the British went into the home of Forte Sankoh, there was a letter to Forte from guess who? Maurice Templesman, saying, we can do business together. And this is someone who had chopped off, it was Forte Sankoh and his boys who were chopping off the hands of little boys and raping little girls. And so, but these were the business partners of, at that time, Maurice Templesman was the consort, I could say he was seen in public with Madeleine Albright. So, you know, let's understand who pulls U.S. policy. And these are individuals. We say the government does this and the government does that. It ain't the government, because it's not us. It's certain individuals who have access to power, and they use that power for their own pecuniary interests.
Right.
A special shout out to the speakers today, Ramsey Clark, Viola Plummer, Akbar, Muhammed, Brian Becker, and of course Cynthia McKinney. Thank you everyone for coming out and supporting us. Stop the criminal bombing in Libya, and have a good night.